which we thought was going to be Shedeur Sanders. So, Brew, what do you think Russ's signing means for Shedeur?
Well, look, Adam Schefter has said they still could draft Shedeur. He's obviously the NFL insider. I'm not, but I don't think Shedeur is going to be a Giant.
Oh.
Why in the world would you bring in 2 veterans if you wanted Shedeur? Now, of course, they could be thinking, well, maybe he won't be there. But they could try to move up to get him if they really liked him. What this tells me is they aren't in love with Shedeur. Like, they may like him, but I think they like some other quarterbacks, maybe the show kid, Jackson Dart, some of these other guys, as much as they like Shedeur. And they're thinking, if we want another quarterback, we'll get one of them in the second round or something like that. But I do not see Shedeur going there. For all the talk about, Deion hovering, I mean, there is some reality to that. And how do you think it would sit with Deion for Shedeur to come in and be like third string behind 2 veterans? So I love the idea of Russell Wilson and Shedeur, Jameis Winston and Shedeur. But all 3 of them makes no sense to me. I don't think he's going to be a Giant.
So I'm not sure if this indicates they don't like him or they actually think so highly of him. And by that, I mean, to me, when I saw this news, I'm like, okay, it means one of 2 things, which are very different evaluations of Shedeur. One is he's not worth the 3rd pick and we're not taking him. The other one is he's not going to be there at 3. And Cleveland's taking him. You know what I mean? But I agree with you that this decision means they do not expect to be able to or to want to draft Shedeur. Now, your point of, well, you could always just trade up and guarantee it, but that takes a willing partner.
Like if you wanted to trade up with the Browns to get him, I mean, the Browns could get something nice and still the guy they wanted 3. You know what I mean?
I get that, but the reason why I think that is trickier than it sounds is this. If the Browns don't want Shedeur and you want him, you have no need to trade up, right? We all agree. Cam is wanted. If they do want Shedeur, then they won't trade back with you. You don't ever trade back with a team when you're both going after the same player. You trade back with a team because they want a player and you're like, oh, the guy we like, or we would be overdrafting. So you're in a really tricky spot in this specific instance for that. I don't think it eliminates the possibility. I understand what you guys are saying, but also Jameis's contract is relatively speaking cheap enough that if they ended up, oh man, we didn't think Shedeur was going to be there, so we're taking him, they could either cut Jameis, or the other reason that I will defend, not just defend the Giants, it's not that they necessarily need defending, but advocate for this process even if they still think we might draft Shedeur at 3. The price of these 2 players is so cheap, and we talk about the value of quarterbacks in the trade market, that I think in a world where Daniel Jones costs $14 million for 1 year, having Jameis and Russ on your, under your control contractually for a total of $14 million for next year, even if you draft a quarterback, if that just means, you know what, Jameis or Russ is an insurance policy, and maybe in training camp someone gets hurt and we can flip one of them for a 5th round pick. Like, the point I am making is not that it is as likely today as it was yesterday the Giants are into Shedeur, but I just think I don't think we should slam the door shut on it, but it is interesting that they went with 2 veterans, and it is also interesting to me, and I know this isn't really the topic, but just for a moment, that the Steelers clearly had no interest in Russ whatsoever, because this is a very cheap deal. And so maybe it's because they have a handshake deal with Rodgers and they know he's coming. But that, to me, is also noteworthy.
Yeah. Well, first off, it's not noteworthy because who cares how the Pittsburgh Steelers evaluate offensive players? You know what I mean? Like, if they were a really well-run offensive team and franchise, then we would say, okay, maybe that means something. They know something about Russ that we don't, but like, I could care less what they do offensively. They haven't shown to be able to run an offense at all, so their opinions mean very, very little to me in that regard. You know, it's just like, yeah. So I always find it funny when you're using another team like that's what they tried to do with, you know, it was noteworthy that the Miami Dolphins couldn't get rid of Fangio fast enough, and it's like that's noteworthy, and it's like why? They're a poorly run team, you know, and they don't know what they're doing. So you know, so using if this was the Kansas City Chiefs, if this was the Ravens, the Eagles, or I don't know, a top team, at least like on the specific side of the ball that you're looking to evaluate, I could understand, makes sense. Obviously not the case. So that's just that aside. Now this whole idea that like, oh, we can use Russ or Jameis as like an insurance policy, this, that. There's no insurance policy here. And there is no trying to be like, oh, I'm going to be a ruthless GM now, and I'm going to move and shake, and I'm going to be able to flip Russ for this and that. You're not good enough. You're not good enough. Just straight up. So how about you just try to figure out the basics first before trying to do any of the other, like, you know, smart stuff. Because you can't even do the basics. You can't even do the layups. So, you know, it's like when people say, oh, these teams, they need to go for it more on fourth down and this and that. And it's like, you can't even get positive yards on second down. And you think you're good enough to now go for it on 4th and 3? You reliably are, you know, 2nd and 10, 2nd and 9, you know, 1st and 15, and yet you're saying we should start going for it more on 4th down. Why? You can't even get the first couple downs right, and now you're going to be a good 4th down team? How about we just get the basics here? How about we just get the basics here? And that's what I kind of feel with the Giants. And you're like, oh, it's not the worst move if you get Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston and you draft a quarterback, and it's like I don't know, man. Kind of like it seems like there's a lot going on there. And you're also asking the coaching staff to do a lot. And also now, and this is what I talk a lot about recently, and it seems like a lot of people don't really seem to understand this. I've been fighting with a lot of Atlanta Falcons fans with regards to this. Guys, these are the people that run these teams are still just people, and they have a limited amount of time and energy, intelligence, resources, etc. You just like how we want to say, like, don't ask your quarterback to do too much, don't ask your, you know, whatever, do too much. It's the same thing for like the staff that actually also like run these teams. And so if you're trying to like, you know, make all these moves and you're just not good enough to be able to do them, you're spreading yourself too thin, and you're now going to be, you know, more likely to kind of continue to do like a subpar job. You know, that's kind of what it boils down to in a lot of ways. You know, Colin's take was that he believes that Cleveland Browns are taking Shedeur Sanders, and so now they're pivoting. But it was just like, so a second ago they felt that they can get Shedeur Sanders, and they got Jameis Winston to be his mentor, and then within like, you know, 24 hours they're like, nope, never mind, that's not gonna happen. Now we're gonna go get Russ. Like, it's just, and then you are tying up a decent amount of money. You're saying cheap enough, but at this point, it is a legitimate chunk of change now when you combine those two quarterbacks together. And that's why it was funny, because when Jameis Winston was first signed, and they were like, oh, you'd be an excellent mentor for Shedeur Sanders, and I was like, nah, I don't really think their personalities would mesh well, and I just don't think that's the type of mentor that Shedeur Sanders would thrive on, and for whatever reason that just struck a chord with people. People were very sensitive to that take for some weird reason, and now they got Russell Wilson, so it's like it's not even what the Giants' plan was. So it's just that's what I keep saying about the Giants. It's just like, what is the actual plan? Like, what are you looking to accomplish? That really is what everything is put down to. And I know it's still being reported that they can still draft another quarterback. And it's just like, well, if you were willing to draft another quarterback, then I don't understand what you're doing here then. There would be no reason to have both of these veterans and then drafting another quarterback. That's just a mess. That's a mess. And anyone with brains knows that. Because also, are you trying to win this coming year? Because this is what someone said in my previous video with this, which was, you know, definitely, great points, right? That like you have the GM and the head coach, they're trying to save themselves. They don't really have time to kind of play the long game here, which is, makes total sense. But that is a problem when you're trying to have a head coach and a GM save their jobs because they have to win now, and now you're kind of split between developing for the long term and developing for the short term. And now you're just in this weirdly bizarre situation. And let's say they did draft a quarterback. You now have 3 quarterbacks. Let's say they were able to draft Shedeur Sanders or even someone else, like Bruce kind of saying, Dart, whoever. Russell Wilson goes 2-2, 1-2. People are going to be like, bring in Jameis. Or they're going to be calling, no, start the rookie. And then Jameis Winston plays. Like, you're going to have this quarterback musical chairs. Like, and that also just starts to frustrate everyone. I got news for you. The O-line doesn't want to have 17 different quarterbacks. The wide receivers, the running backs. I can't imagine Brian Dable's like, yeah, man, just give me lots of quarterbacks. I love it. It's so great. I get to pick and choose what I want to do. People want clarity. If as a fan, and even the media is confused on the outside looking in, I promise you, there are more New York Giants players that are confused than not about like, well, what is this year going to look like? What is the plan? What are we trying to do here? So we are trying to win. We got Russ now, and we paid him $21 million. Like, okay. So we're not trying to tank. We know that. But it's just like, Russ is going to be our guy now? Oh, wait, they just drafted another quarterback, so Russ is only going to be the guy this year? What happens if we like, you just don't have clarity. And you need clarity. I talk a lot about that so much. Clarity. You need clarity in terms of what's our offensive identity. Clarity in terms of what's the objective for this game. Clarity of what's the objective for this quarter. Clarity for what's the objective of this practice. Of this off season. It's like, where is the clarity? And you can see the other teams that are reliably great or consistently good. You can see the clarity. You can see the intention. You can see the path. You can see what the Minnesota Vikings are looking to do. You can see what the Buffalo Bills are looking to do. The Los Angeles Rams are looking to do. Last season, it was very clear what the Philadelphia Eagles were looking to do. Hire new coordinators. Draft defensive players. Get Saquon. Boost this offense. Like, it was just very clear steps. You can see the Commanders this offseason so far. Very clear what they're looking to do. We want to add another weapon. We want to boost our O-line. And we're probably going to draft defensively. Let's go. Let's get after it. It's very clear. Clear path. Even for the Commanders, when they went out before they got, Jaden Daniels. And they're like, all right, we're going to get Jaden. We're going to get Marcus Mariota. Like, it was very obvious. We're going to have some support. We're going to get a veteran backup to help support him. We want an OC who we know has proven himself offensively. I know he got fired, but we still believe in him. Like, it's just very clear. Very clear. And then you have this, and this is just the opposite of clear, the opposite of clarity. And everyone trying to figure out what does it all mean. And again, if the Giants were a better run team, we would say, all right, listen, I don't know exactly what the plan is, but I trust them to get the job done. Nobody could say that about the New York Giants. Nobody. I'm sorry. Any Giants fan watching this, like, you know it too. That's why I always say, like, just simplify, clarity. Get the layups. Do the obvious moves. Signing Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston and then potentially drafting a quarterback. Because then also, like, the plan is, like, if you're not going to draft a quarterback, then that means you think that Jameis Winston or Russell Wilson are going to be your long-term quarterback for the next few years. And if not, that means that you want to draft a quarterback for the next year. And if you do, then why are you signing Russell Wilson and even spending any money right now? I'd rather you just buy up cheap, younger talent at that point. And maybe you can develop them, get some steals. Again, things that the Eagles have done. So And I'm not saying the Eagles did that this year, but I'm just saying in seasons past. Like, take a flyer on some team, on some players that were kind of like, you know what? They might be a lot better than people believe. Like, again, like the Eagles did with Becton, etc. Bond. So it's not like, well, they got to spend the money somewhere. Yeah, if you plan on drafting a quarterback, maybe getting Russell Wilson is not necessarily the plan here. And if you're like, well, they want him maybe as a mentor for the next year when they draft a quarterback. And it's like, I don't know. They just signed him to a 1-year deal. And they brought in Jameis Winston. It just I'm struggling to make sense of it. And I keep hoping that, like, I'll hear a take that I'm just kind of like, oh, that makes sense. Or someone in the comment section will say something and I'm like, oh, you know what? I didn't look at it like that. And sometimes when I really can't wrap my head around some of these things, I'm just like, am I missing something? Am I missing something? But then when I see everyone collectively kind of just like, I don't know. And again, and the last thing I'll say is, and I said this in my previous video, is that, like, right, you do have this imbalance between short term and long term. Short term, on the immediate short term, in the immediacy of the moment, like, I think Russell Wilson can legitimately have some success with the New York Giants and Brian Daboll and company. Like, I actually do. So if we're looking at it on the immediacy of the moment, like, it's like, yeah, it's not technically the worst thing. But you always have to try to balance out, like, win now versus building something special for tomorrow. And at this point, a quarterback like a Russell Wilson is just pretty much just the perfect example of kind of like, and Jameis Winston for that matter, where it's kind of just like, yeah, we can win some games, we can have some fun moments, spoil a game even for like the Commanders or the Eagles, who, you know, are clearly better teams, but like, it kind of, you know, hurts us in the long term, and then it takes us away from the greater purpose. You know, a $20 million quarterback is arguably one of an old $20 million quarterback is arguably one of the scariest things a team can sign as your starting quarterback, because there's not going to be absolute garbage. He'll be able to win you some games, and they'll always essentially get you further from actually finding that real quarterback, that next quarterback for you. Always. Unless you know, you're able to draft your next starter in the 2nd or 3rd round, which is possible. It's what happened with Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles. But, you know, it's a very unique situation, obviously. That's obviously not the norm. We have examples of it, but it's obviously not the norm. And I don't even know if that was 100% the intention from the Philadelphia Eagles when they had Carson Wentz, quite frankly. I don't know if they were really kind of like, we're going to move on from Carson and start Jalen Hurts. Like, I know that's obviously what it became, but I don't think that's even what they wanted, because that's why they even fired Doug Peterson, because they wanted to keep Carson Wentz. Like, they at that time wanted Carson Wentz to still be their number 1 quarterback. So it's just like, it worked out for the Eagles, but that was not their intention. That was not, you know, they were able to pivot and make it work, and, you know, credit to Jalen Hurts as well, but, you know, it wasn't the master plan when it was all said and done. So I don't know, but those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about the New York Giants, Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, Shedeur Sanders, you know, Cam Ward, any other quarterback? Just throwing Patrick Mahomes in there too, you know. Well, how do you think about, well, how would Patrick Mahomes, Jameis Winston, Russell Wilson work for the New York Giants? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions, let's get in some fights, but ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community here. I absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.